Laptop computer spins onto the screen, opens, and displays ATP Education Program webinar series, closes, and then spins off the screen.
Hello. Welcome to this webinar focusing on Does My Student Need Assistive Technology? This is the second part in a short series that we are focusing on the evaluation of assistive technology needs. In this particular webinar, we're going to be focusing on the process of feature matching. In this webinar, we're going to be focusing on the steps related to a feature matching process. We're then going to be identifying strategies for identifying those key features of potential AT tools and systems that may be beneficial for a student. And finally, we're going to be applying the feature match process in identifying and analyzing potential assistive technology tools and systems. Before we get started, I'd like to do a quick little review. I think it's important to have some foundational concepts in definition and process to understand how all of this fits together. A brief review of assistive technology focuses on a good definition, having a good working definition. So we say that assistive technology is anything not surgically implanted, but really it depends on the purpose for which it is used. This means that there is no classification of what is and is not assistive technology. When we talk about the purpose, we talk about it as a compensatory intervention. This means that it's going to allow a student to do a task that he or she could not otherwise do at some expected performance level. By definition, assistive technology is used by a student with a disability and may be a single tool or a system of tools working together. Finally, within special education, assistive technology is determined to be necessary for a student to achieve a free appropriate public education by the IFSP or IEP team. All of these components need to be present and the criteria need to be met for technology, any technology, to be considered assistive technology. When we look at a process, the process of assistive technology starts with AT consideration. And here we ask the question, does the student need assistive technology? This process is informed by what we're talking about today, which is the evaluation of assistive technology needs. The evaluation of assistive technology needs allows us to gather information about the student and the student's needs in order to determine whether or not assistive technology is necessary. The evaluation of assistive technology needs also allows us to determine what potential assistive technology would help the student. If assistive technology is needed, we then provide the assistive technology, we have a plan for implementation, and ultimately we check to make sure, is the assistive technology working in allowing the student to receive the benefit he or she needs. A big question that we get is, who owns the evaluation of assistive technology needs process? At the end of the day, the IEP or IFSP team is the owner of this process, meaning that it is the IEP team or the IFSP team that is conducting the evaluation of assistive technology needs. Generally speaking, when conducting an evaluation of assistive technology needs, the more complex the student needs, the more information that is going to need to be gathered, and the more factors will need to be considered. Again, the purpose of an evaluation of assistive technology needs is really to develop a picture of the child or student's performance on various tasks in various contexts related to the IFSP or IEP goals and objectives. It really, at the heart of it, is a problem-solving process where we identify barriers that are preventing the child from being successful, and then using that information to determine if assistive technology can be a potential assistance, or if it is, we can then also decide what assistive technology may be needed. Good assistive technology decisions are important. We talked about this a little bit last time. This is the acronym that kind of guides our process. If we look at the first letter in each of these, this leads us to this mnemonic leads us to this phrase: gather and analyze, try, decide, acquire, and implement. Last time we talked about gather and analyze, where we gathered information about the student in order to get a better picture of the student. Today, we are moving on to try. And in try, this is broken down into two processes. One is feature matching, and the second is conducting tool trials. Today, we're going to be focusing on feature matching. Just as a reminder, and before we get started, when we start thinking about potential assistive technology solutions, it's important to avoid the pitfall where we start by thinking through technology solutions first, thinking through what technology is available, thinking through technology that we are familiar with. We really want to frame the issue. That was a lot of the gather and analyze phase. Now we have information, and we need to use that information to begin thinking through what are some potential assistive technology matches. So let's talk about feature matching. I'm going to use this as a way to kind of compare our process. If you've ever been in the position where you go out and buy a house or a car or any really major purchase, most people don't go into it blindly. They've had an idea and they've done some analysis to kind of figure out what is it that they want or what is it that they need. And we think through this idea of what are the types of features we want in a potential house or a car. In a house, it may be the number of bedrooms, it may be the number of floors, it may be the size of the house, it may be does it have a yard, it may be does it have a fireplace. Some of those features are absolutely necessary, and some of those features are things that we would like, but we could go ahead and live without. When we engage in feature matching, we're going through a very similar process. In feature matching, we talk about a process that helps us determine and really identify those features of potential AT tools or systems that can help a child be successful. Where do we get those features from? Well, in the first part of this, when we talked about gather and analyze, we got a good picture of the student. We've identified what the student needs to do and what the student can currently do. And then we go through a process of starting to understand why is it that the student is having difficulty on those activities and tasks that he or she needs to accomplish. We do that by identifying barriers related to the student, related to the environment, and related to the tasks. We can then turn those barriers and those needs into potential feature statements and then use them to, in essence, go shopping for potential assistive technology solutions. So here is the process. We talk about what is it that the student needs to do. We then start getting into what are the barriers preventing the student from succeeding. And finally, we talk about what are the potential features of assistive technology that would help the student. This is the crux of the scenario. So I am going to go ahead and put up a scenario and give you a moment or two to read it. In this scenario, John is a 5th grade student with a specific learning disability, and he's at a school that has one-to-one deployment of Chromebooks. His specific learning disability impacts his ability to decode words in that he has not yet developed the automaticity in applying those phonic rules. So as he's trying to attack those words, he's not really, he doesn't have that level of automatic recall and application of those phonics rules in order to adequately decode those words. The IEP team has noted that John's performance in any class that requires reading is negatively impacted. It's pretty understandable. Generally, John demonstrates fluency on grade level text of 36 words per minute. And if you know anything about rates of fluency, 36 words per minute for a fifth grade student shows a marked discrepancy between what the student needs to do and what the student can currently do. The IEP team has set a goal that John will demonstrate comprehension of grade level text used in his core classes. So let's break down the scenario. What is it that John needs to do? In this case, he needs to demonstrate comprehension of grade level text used in his core classes. So let's identify the barriers that John is facing. So we know with regard to the student himself, John has limited automaticity of those phonic rules, and that is slowing down his decoding rate, which is negatively impacting his reading comprehension. We also know from gathering information that John cognitively fatigues when engaged in reading tasks as the day progresses. So he's better at reading in the morning than he is in the afternoon, because as he's approaching those reading tasks, cognitively, he's just not able to attend to that task. We also know from interviewing the student that he is very concerned about looking different than his peers. When we begin to identify and analyze barriers in the environment, we know that John is unable to understand what he reads, one, in multiple classes. So this is happening in multiple classes throughout his day. And this also occurs in both home and at school. Many of the environments John is in also dictate that he needs to be able to read to himself without disturbing others. And that happens in testing scenarios, it happens in independent reading scenarios, lots of different things. When we look at the task itself, we start to identify what are the types of text in which he is having difficulty, what types of text are providing barriers to him being successful in gaining access to that printed information. And we identify textbooks, textbook-related instructional materials, teacher-created instructional materials, assessments, and homework. So we use those barriers and we flip them into potential feature statements. So when we look at some of the barriers, John has limited automatic retrieval of phonics rules. One of the features that would be really good is for a potential assistive technology tool or system to bypass that decoding process by providing an audio representation of the text. We're also, based on data that we have, identifying that if that audio representation is paired with visual representation, kind of like highlighting the text as it reads, that could also be a potentially good feature. We want to make sure that whatever system that we use allows for easy navigation through the text. If I'm reading the text, typically, I'm able to go ahead and flip pages. I'm able to scan through headings. I'm able to hone in on key terms because they are bolded. How does this work when a student is accessing the text auditorily? Even with visual support, the navigation is a little bit different. So we want to be able to make sure that there is a find text tool or a navigate by headings tool or something along those lines. Also want to, since we know that there's some cognitive fatigue, we want to make sure that John can bookmark things for later reference. So in the same way that we might attach a sticky note to a physical book, we want to be able to allow John to mark particular passages or where he left off in reading so that he can go back and reference it later. And because we know that in the environment, everyone has a Chromebook, it would be good to find a tool that runs on that Chromebook because number one, it's a tool that he already has, but number two, it's going to address that concern that John has about looking differently than his peers. We start looking at the environmental barriers. Some of the features that come up from there are that we want to make sure that a potential tool can be used in multiple classes. We also want to make sure that it can be used in school and out of school. So that's going to come into play with what types of permissions are available on the Chromebook that's going to allow the tool to be used outside of school. Does the tool require internet access, or can it be run without internet access in an offline mode? Because he needs to read to himself without disturbing others, we want to make sure that whatever tool or system that we select can be used through a connected audio headset or a Bluetooth headset. And definitely because we are operating in so many different environments, we want to make sure that John's assistive technology is portable. Next, when we look at the task itself, if you recall, we identified that he needs to be able to read textbooks, textbook-related instruction materials, teacher-created materials, assessments, and homework. So we flip these into potential features. It needs to be able to be used with school-provided textbooks. Now, if the school-provided textbooks have an electronic component, is that electronic version compatible with a system that's going to read, or do we need to alter it? Or can we access something like Bookshare to download those school-based texts in order to put them into a system that's going to be able to be read by the student? Because we're also dealing with teacher-created instructional materials, either those instructional materials need to be created in such a way that the reading system can easily access them, or we want a feature that's going to allow it to be scanned in and read back to the student. Because we are using this on so many different scenarios, the ability for the tool to be used within secure assessment situations is also important. And finally, we want to be able to think about using it in both in-network and out-of-network, as we've kind of talked about previously. Those are some ways that we take barriers and flip them into potential features. The features can then be used as a way for us to go out and shop or investigate potential tools, and guides our thinking in how do we then go ahead and select potential tools to try with the student. One of the questions that comes up quite frequently is, should cost be a feature? At this stage of the game, generally speaking, cost should not be a feature when defining potential assistive technology. Student need is the overriding piece that defines the features related to potential assistive technology. Down the road, however, if we find systems that are generally comparable. In other words, they have practically the same features, and they are both going to meet the student's needs in the same way. That would be a time that we could apply cost as a potential decision, a feature in that process. But at this point in time, we want to focus on what does the student need, not how much does it cost. When we have identified all of those features, we can then use a tool like this to go ahead and list the features and list the potential assistive technology tools. This tool is basically a table in which features are listed across the top, and in each row, there are potential assistive technology products that are there. Then we can use this to analyze the degree to which those AT tools and systems have the features necessary for the student to be successful. There are some pre-made assistive technology feature matches. Many of these are really with regard to augmentative and alternative communication. But going back and looking and creating our own is a really good way to go ahead and start this process. I do want to introduce you to a tool that was created by Ocali. That's Ocali. And they're out of Ohio, and it's called the Sifs Tool. The Sifs is a web-based tool that supports decision-making related to assistive technology by going through that feature match process. The tool asks the team a series of questions in a particular domain, so reading, writing, etc. And based on this answers to those questions, it begins to help the team generate a list of potential features that can be used in that decision-making process. This is a great tool to go ahead and get started, but I also want to warn that not every domain is currently represented in this tool. We've talked about some different resources today related to feature matching, different documents, different tools. I have gone ahead and put those together in a Google sheet that you can access so that you can have access to this. In order to access those resources, please go to bit.ly/ATP eval of AT need 2. That's bit.ly, bit.ly/ATP eval of AT NEED and the number 2. Thank you for joining today. This has been a great time to connect with you, talking about feature matching and what this looks like in this process. For more information on feature matching, please go ahead and contact us at atp.nebraska.gov/education. And we have a whole bunch of additional features on our website that talk about feature matching as well as other parts of the assistive technology process. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you for watching. For more information on the ATP education program, please visit our website at atp.nebraska.gov/education or email us at atp.education@nebraska.gov.